So let's begin today's class. First question: how many members can be nominated to the Lok Sabha by the President? So this is a very good question because recently there have been some changes in this aspect. Originally, the President could nominate 2 members to the Lok Sabha from the Anglo-Indian community. It is written in Article 331 of the Constitution that in the Lok Sabha, Anglo-Indian community has to be represented and 2 nominations are to be filled by the President. But recently, in 2019, there was a Constitutional Amendment Act, the 104th Amendment Act, by which this provision has been removed. The reason being that nowadays there are very few Anglo-Indian people in India, so there is no need to reserve 2 seats for them in the Lok Sabha. That is why this Article 331, this provision in this article has been repealed, has been removed by this 104th Constitutional Amendment Act of 2019. Right? So currently, President cannot nominate anyone to the Lok Sabha. Okay? Next question. Protection of wildlife comes under which of the following in the Constitution of India? So protection of wildlife is mentioned in which of these? Fundamental duties, directive principles of state policy, or the 7th schedule? So you have to pick the correct options. And if you look at the options, there is more than one in all 4 of them. Protection of wildlife is very important, especially in the current climate, where everyone is now focusing on sustainable development and environment protection and all those things. So wildlife also has become quite relevant in these recent years. Now, protection of wildlife is mentioned in, the correct answer is D, all 3 of these. So, fundamental duty, directive principle of state policy, and the 7th schedule. All 3 of them have the mention of protection of wildlife. I'll tell you the exact articles also. So, Article 48A, first of all, fundamental duty. I beg your pardon. Article 48A is the directive principle of state policy, which mandates that the state, a state being, the definition of state is given in Article 12. So, state shall endeavor to protect and improve the environment and safeguard the forest and wildlife of the country. So, this is the exact language that is written in the Constitution. And it would be best if you could just memorize this whole phrase: endeavor to protect and improve the environment, safeguard the forest and wildlife. So you have to protect and improve the environment and safeguard the forest and wildlife of the country, and it is the mandate given to the state to do it. Now, it wasn't originally there when the Constitution was framed in 1950. It wasn't there because at that time, all these things were not so important. Forest, wildlife, these things became important later on. So, in the 42nd Amendment, very famous amendment by Indira Gandhi in 1976, these things were added. So Article 48A was added. Also, in the 7th schedule, which contains list of subjects on which both the center and the state can make laws. So in this schedule, amendment was made and forest and protection of wild animals was added as a subject on which both the center and the states have now power to make laws. So you have the Wildlife Protection Act made by the center, and you have respective laws made by different states also. Also, it is a fundamental duty under Article 51AG, which states that it shall be duty of every citizen of India to protect and improve the natural environment, including forests and wildlife. This also was added by the 42nd Amendment. The whole section 51A was added by the 42nd Amendment. So, in this, subclause G was added, which mentions environment and forests and wildlife. So all these 3 things were done by the 42nd Amendment Act by Indira Gandhi in 1976 during emergency. Very important, and they are still there, and still, if not more, relevant as compared to 76. All right, clear? Moving on. Which of the following has the authority to prescribe conditions for the acquisition of citizenship of India? So, who can make laws or who can prescribe conditions relating to citizenship of India? Who decides about the laws relating to citizenship of India? The answer is A, Parliament. So it is the power of the Parliament to prescribe laws, to make laws, to give rules and conditions regarding citizenship. In Article 1 of the Constitution, the first article of the Constitution, gives Parliament this power of prescribing conditions for acquisition of citizenship by making laws. And in the exercise of this power, the Parliament has enacted the Citizenship Act of 1955. Very important, very much in news also, because it was amended recently and there were massive protests regarding this. So, CAA, Citizenship Amendment Act, was done a few years back. So, this Citizenship Act of 1955 is very, very important. It was made by the Parliament under powers given to it by the Constitution through Article 1. Clear? So, only the Parliament has the power relating to prescribing conditions for citizenship of India. Not the President, not the Election Commission, not the President, only the Parliament. Moving on. Which article of the Constitution deals with the definition of money bills? So, money bills are defined under which article? You should know it, the number of the article as well as the content of the article. What are the conditions through which a bill is deemed to be a money bill? So, Article 110 deals with the definition of money bills. And this article states that a bill is deemed to be a money bill if it contains only, so only is very important, only provisions dealing with imposition, abolition, remission, alteration, or regulation of any tax. So these five adjectives always be there: imposition, abolition, remission, alteration, or regulation. So when you are talking about any tax, these five conditions will always be there. Apart from taxation, borrowing of money by the union government also comes under the purview of money bills. So if you read Article 1110, there are some 5-6 subclauses which deal with the definition of money bills. That if a bill fulfills any of these conditions, then it will be deemed to be a money bill. And why is it so important that a bill is a money bill or not? Because the conditions for passing of a ordinary bill and a money bill in the Parliament are very, very different. So, if a bill is money bill or not, that is a very important question. And who decides if a bill is money bill or not? The power to decide that rests with the Speaker of the Lok Sabha. So, if there is some confusion or any argument whether a bill is money bill or not, the decision of the presiding officer, that is the Speaker, would be final in this regard. He is the one who will decide, who will put a stamp on the bill saying it is a money bill and it is to be processed accordingly, different from an ordinary bill. Okay, what is the current strength of judges of the Supreme Court? At present, how many judges are there in the Supreme Court? So, if you are asking at present, that means that the number keeps on changing. Currently, the strength is 34, out of which one is the Chief Justice and 33 are other Supreme Court judges. So currently, it is 34, the strength, the maximum strength of the Supreme Court. And this number came into being in 2019 when the center increased the number of Supreme Court judges from 31 to 34. And in this 34, Chief Justice is included. Okay, so right now, 34 judges of Supreme Court are there, including the Chief Justice. Next question. Which of the following statements are correct regarding interstate river water disputes? Also quite important because as you know, rivers are not confined to any one particular state. They normally flow through multiple states. And because of that, since rivers are a vital source of water and electricity, so drinking water, irrigation, fishing, so all these things, so all the states concerned are inevitably drawn into dispute with each other. So you keep on hearing about them: Kaveri River dispute, Mahanadi River dispute, Krishna River dispute. So all these disputes happen between different states regarding the distribution of river water, interstate rivers, and how their water is to be utilized. How much water which state can use. That is the basic root of the dispute. So in this context, which of the following statements are correct? First, the Parliament may provide for the adjudication of any dispute with respect to the use, distribution, and control of waters of any interstate river. So, this is correct. Parliament can provide for the resolution of any dispute arising between two or more states over the use, distribution, and control of river water. Because if there is a dispute between two states, then where will they go? They will go to the center. So the Parliament will come into being and it will provide for the adjudication of any dispute. How will it provide for the dispute adjudication? By making laws. Simple. That's what Parliament can do. It can make laws. So there is a law, Interstate River Water Dispute Act of 1962, under which all the provisions are there that if there is a dispute, what will happen and how will it be resolved. So a tribunal will be formed. How will, what will be the composition of the tribunal? How will it, function? How will it work? All these things are written in the act which has been made by the Parliament, and this power has been given to it by the Constitution of India under Article 262. So in the Constitution, it is written that Parliament has the power to resolve disputes, and in exercise of that power, a law has been made by the Parliament, and through this law, these disputes are adjudicated now. Second option, the second statement rather, Parliament may also stop the Supreme Court and any other court to exercise jurisdiction in respect of such dispute. So can the Parliament do that? The answer is yes. In the law itself, the Parliament has written that the decision of the tribunal, which will be formed over a particular dispute, the decision of the tribunal will be final and it cannot be challenged in the Supreme Court. So very, very important thing. There are very few things which cannot be challenged in the Supreme Court. The decision of the Interstate River Water Dispute Adjudication Tribunal is one of them. So this you should remember, that the power of Supreme Court does not extend to interstate river water disputes. Okay, clear? So the answer for this question is both statements 1 and 2 are correct. Right? Interstate river water disputes, very important. Okay, moving on. So all these things I already told you. Article 262 of the Constitution has two provisions. Basically the two statements which we just read. Next question. How many members are nominated by the governor in the state legislative council? So the first question was nomination by the president in the Lok Sabha. This question is nomination by the governor in the state legislative council. So first of all, not all states have the legislative councils. All of them have legislative assemblies, yes, where members are elected directly, like in Lok Sabha. Now, legislative councils are present in very few states, and members in these councils are elected indirectly, similar to Rajya Sabha, but not exactly similar. I'll tell you how they are different. So, members of state legislative councils. So, first of all, their strength. It is prescribed in the constitution itself that the size or the number of members of the legislative councils cannot be more than one third of the members of the state legislative assembly. This you must remember, that council will be small and it will be at max one third of the assembly. Minimum it has to be 40 members. Okay. So if a legislative assembly has less than 120 members, the council will have 40 members. If it has more than 120 members, the assembly, the number of council members will increase, but it won't be more than one third of the members of the assembly. So this is the size restriction on the council. It is given in the constitution itself, so you cannot change it. Okay. And how are the members elected, or what is the composition of the council? I'll tell you. It's quite interesting. You can expect a question because it is a bit tricky also. So 4 parts are to be done first of all, or rather 5 parts. 1, 2, 3, 4, and the 5th one would be the governor part, which I'll tell you later. So first of all, one third members of the councils are to be elected by members of local bodies in that state. And what are local bodies in the state? Municipalities are there, gram panchayats, panchayat samitis, and district councils or zilla parisads. So the last 3 are the rural local bodies. Municipalities are the urban local bodies. So all these 4 bodies come together and elect one third of the members of the council. Okay, one third is done. Next one third members of the council are elected by whom? By members of the legislative assembly. So the MLAs of the state come together and elect one third members of the council. Okay, this much is clear. So one third are done, 2/3 is left. Now out of that 2/3, 3 portions are to be done. 1/12, and 5/6. So first 1/12 members are elected by whom? By persons who are graduates of 3 years standing residing in the state. So this you must remember, that all the persons who are graduates of at least 3 years who are residing in the state are eligible to vote and elect 1/12 of the members of the legislative councils. Clear? This you should remember as it is. Graduates of 3 years standing residing in that state. So 3 conditions are there. They should be graduates. They should be 3 years. They should be graduate of more than 3 years, and they should be residing in that state. So if you fulfill these 3 conditions, you are eligible to vote and to elect members of legislative councils. Next division, 1/12 members of the council are elected by whom? By teachers who have spent at least 3 years in teaching in educational institutions within the state, not lower than secondary schools, and including colleges and universities. So lots of conditions. They should be teachers, and also they should have 3 years experience, similar to the graduate condition. They should be residing, they should be teaching in the state, yes, and they can't be teaching in an institution which is lower than a secondary school. So primary school teachers are not allowed. Okay, other teachers are eligible to vote to elect 1/12, and the remaining, which is 5/6, remaining 1/6 are nominated by the governor, which was the original question. So 1/3, 1/12, 1/12 becomes 5/6, and remaining 1/6 are nominated by the governor. Okay, so a bit complicated, but if you memorize it once and for all, you can expect a question because not many people are able to do it. So five parts are there: one third, one third, 1/12, 1/12, and remaining, which is 1/6. Remaining is the governor part. Clear? Members of legislative councils (MLCs) are chosen in this manner. Very good question. Next, what is the meaning of the term adjournment sine die? So adjournment is done of houses of parliament, mostly in which the session comes to an end, and it is done when it is done. Usually, a next date is prescribed. That see, today we are concluding, and we will meet again after 4 days or after 1 month or whatever. Now, when there is a adjournment sine die, it means that the next date of meeting is not prescribed. So it is the Latin term sine. Sine means without, and die means day. So without assigning a day for further meeting, the house is adjourned, or rather an assembly, because Lok Sabha as well as Legislative Assembly both can be adjourned. The date is notified later. So when the adjournment is done, no future date is decided. Later on, it is decided and notified. So if there is an adjournment without appointing a day on which it will assemble again, that adjournment is known as adjournment sine die. Without a day, without a next day, sine die. So sine term you will see in other legal maxims also. Sine means without. Okay, moving on. In which year the institution of high courts originated in India? Or rather, in which year the high courts were installed or instituted in India? So the answer is, so this is a history question also, and this is a polity question also. The answer to that is in 1862. High courts were first of all set up in India at three places: Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras, because these were the three presidencies. And in these presidencies, high courts were set up under the Indian High Courts Act of 1861. So this act was passed by the British Parliament, and it said that in India from now on high courts will be there. So next year, high courts were set up in 1862. They continued to be the highest court of appeal up until the Federal Court of India was created under the Government of India Act of 1935. Okay, so Federal Court of India came into being after the 1935 Act. High Courts of India came into being after the 1861 Act. This Federal Court eventually turned into Supreme Court on 28 January 1950. So on this day, Supreme Court of India came into being, and it replaced the Federal Court of India. So if someone asks you when did Supreme Court of India originate, the answer would be 2 days after the Republic Day, the first Republic Day, 2 days after the adoption of the Constitution. So 28th January is the founding date of the Constitution of the Supreme Court of India. It replaced the Federal Court of India. And Federal Court of India came into being 35, and before that there used to be only high courts. The first Chief Justice of India was Hiralal Kania. This also extra bit of information. First CGI, they might ask sometime, H.J. Kania. Okay, so all these things you must know, also from a current polity perspective as well as a history perspective. Which of the following schedules of the Constitution of India contains provisions regarding defection. So defection basically means if some MP or some MLA leaves one party, one political party, and joins another party. So he is said to be having defected from a particular party and joined another party. Defection is simply that. So which schedule of the Constitution deals with defection? Schedule number 10. So 10 schedule wasn't originally there in the Constitution. It was introduced by the 52nd Amendment Act in the year 1985 during the tenure of Rajiv Gandhi. So before that, there were no constitutional provisions regarding defection. In 1985, this amendment was done to the Constitution. 10th schedule was added, and this schedule contains all provisions regarding defection. Okay. So you should remember the year in which it came into being, 1985, through which Amendment Act, 52nd, and which schedule was added? Schedule number 10. Okay, originally the Constitution had 8 schedules, and 9 and 9A were added, Panchayat and local bodies, and then 10th was added. Okay, defection, 10th schedule. Moving on. One more thing. The decision on questions as to disqualification on grounds of defection are referred to the chairman or speaker of the respective house, and that decision is subject to judicial review by the Supreme Court. So if a member defects, he is liable to be disqualified. And who decides this question? The chairman or the speaker. And that decision can be challenged in a court of law. So as I said earlier, interstate river water disputes cannot be challenged in the Supreme Court. This decision, however, of disqualification of a member on the ground of defection can be challenged in the Supreme Court. Now, this is known as judicial review. But the decision, first of all, is to be taken by the chairman or the speaker. This also very important, you should know. Because normally, the speaker or the chairman are from the ruling party. So many times the decision of disqualification is politically based also. So there are a lot of arguments, lot of disputes regarding this. So this is a very important power of the speaker. Another important power that we just discussed was the money bill one, in which the speaker had the power to decide whether a bill is money bill or not. That is also very important. Secondly, this one, disqualification on the ground of defection, is also a very important power to the presiding officer of the house, whether it's the chairman or the speaker.